My mother used to say love is sacrifice, and for the longest time, I believed her. I sacrificed my time, my dreams, and eventually, even my self-worth. All for a man who turned out to be a fraud wearing a wedding ring. My husband, Cole, was charming in public and calculating in private. He knew exactly what to say to make me feel like the problem. But the truth unraveled slowly, like thread slipping from a worn-out seam. At first, I noticed his texts, too frequent, too secretive. Then came the receipts, the unexplained absences, the scent of perfume I didn't own. But nothing prepared me for the final insult, learning that he had been using my money, my resources, and my name to spoil another woman. His mistress. Her name was Ava, and she smiled like she had nothing to lose, because she didn't. I was the one losing everything. Cole paraded her around like a prize, and I was expected to stay quiet. "It's complicated," he said when I confronted him. "You don't understand her, like I do." I stood there, holding the financial records in my hands, spa retreats, designer shoes, weekend trips, funded by me, all for her. When I asked why, he sighed like I was exhausting. "Because she makes me feel alive," he said. "You've just been cold." That word, cold. Like I was the one who had betrayed us. Like I had failed him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared. Something inside me turned off like a light switch. And in that darkness, something new began to grow. I didn't leave right away. I wanted to understand how deep the rot ran. Every detail became fuel. Every lie he told became a thread I pulled. I found out he used my credit score to lease a second apartment. My name was on bills I'd never seen. I was a ghost in my own life, footing the bill for someone else's fantasy. And the worst part, he didn't even flinch when I confronted him again. "You're overreacting," he said. "At least I'm not hiding it anymore." Like I should be grateful. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror for hours. I looked like a woman I didn't recognize. Hollow, tired, too used to holding the pieces together. That's when I knew I couldn't fix this. I wouldn't. Something snapped in me, but not in the way he feared. There were no tantrums, no bags thrown on the lawn, no shouting, just stillness. He thought he had broken me, but what he really did was release me. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to understand. I stopped speaking altogether, at least to him. Instead, I spoke to lawyers. I spoke to my bank. I spoke to the women in my life who'd been silently watching and waiting for me to open my eyes. Cold? No. Focused. I moved money. I collected documents. I changed the locks on the studio apartment he thought I didn't know about. I was careful, precise, patient. The same woman he thought was too soft to fight back was preparing to dismantle the illusion he lived in. He noticed the shift, but he didn't know what it meant. "You're different lately," he said one night while sipping wine he didn't pay for. Still mad. I looked at him, not with rage, but with distance. "No," I said simply. "I'm just done." He laughed, thinking I was bluffing. That's the thing about men like Cole. They believe a woman won't leave if she hasn't already screamed. But I had no more energy for theatrics. My silence was colder than any fury he'd ever seen. I started dressing differently. Cleaner lines, red lips, straight shoulders. He tried to flirt, to test if I'd still bend. I didn't. He was losing grip, and he could feel it. But he didn't know yet. I had already let go completely. My exit plan wasn't built on emotion. It was built on strategy. I sold what I needed to sell. I cleared my name from the debts he secretly opened. I documented everything. Ava, his little secret turned public disaster, had no idea that the money had stopped flowing weeks ago. She still posted gifts on Instagram, tagging a man who no longer had access to the funds that bought them. And when she confronted him, because of course she would, he finally turned his anger on me. "How could you embarrass me like this?" he shouted. I smiled, ice in my veins. You did that all by yourself, Cole. He wasn't used to that version of me. The one who didn't beg. The one who didn't cry. The one who vanished emotionally long before she physically walked away. The day I left, I didn't pack everything. Just what mattered. He came home to an empty closet and a letter on the kitchen table. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. You used me to please your mistress. Now, you'll have to use yourself. I didn't wait around for his reaction. I was already gone, watching the sunrise from a hotel balcony 2 cities away. I didn't check my phone. Didn't check social media. I wasn't running. I was rising. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. He had spent years telling me I was too much, too sensitive, too cold. But now, I was exactly as cold as I needed to be. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. The silence that followed wasn't lonely, it was sacred. I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was. But even that grief passed like a tide. I took a new job, one that valued me, not just my ability to endure. I moved into a smaller place, decorated in colors he used to hate. I lit candles every night. I played music while I worked. My smile came back, not as decoration, but as declaration. I was building something new, something mine. And while he was left explaining to Ava why the money was gone and the charm had faded, I was falling in love with peace. Cold? No. I was fire-dressed as frost. And I had no intention of thawing for a man who mistook devotion for servitude. He tried to contact me, first through calls, then emails, then friends. He's not doing well? One said. He says he didn't realize what he had. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had already said everything in the way I left. There's no conversation after betrayal, just distance. He had chosen to use me, to drain me, to discard me when I was convenient. And now he wanted comfort? Closure? No. He could cry into the lap of the woman he destroyed us for. I wasn't going back, not even to say goodbye. Sometimes the coldest thing a woman can do is nothing at all. And in that stillness, he would finally feel everything he had made me carry. He showed up unannounced at my new workplace. I saw him through the glass, disheveled, desperate, the same man who once mocked my tears. We need to talk, he pleaded. But I had no space for nostalgia dressed as regret. We don't, I replied flatly and walked past him like he was a stranger. Because he was. The man I married no longer existed, if he ever did. He called after me, his voice cracking, drawing stares. But I didn't turn around. I owed him nothing. Not a glance, not a conversation. Let Ava be his audience now. She had front row seats to the man she thought was her prize. Let her learn what it means to build a future on someone else's ruin. I was no longer their foundation. I was already flying. Cole spiraled. I heard about it from mutual acquaintances. He'd lost his job. Apparently, using company funds for client entertainment didn't go unnoticed forever. Ava left him 2 weeks later, claiming he'd changed. That's the irony, isn't it? He hadn't changed at all. He was just no longer funded by the woman he discarded. And suddenly, his temper wasn't so charming. His excuses didn't sound so poetic. She ran the same way I once should have. But I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching him crumble, only clarity. That had been my life, every day, for years. I had lived in the ruins while he played king. Now he sat in the ashes, wondering why no one came to save him. The answer was simple. He taught us all not to. Ava tried to reach out next. Of course. I didn't know, she wrote in a message request. If I had known how badly he treated you, I deleted it before finishing. I wasn't interested in apologies shaped like excuses. She didn't care when she thought she was the exception. Only when she realized she'd become the rule. I didn't hate her. I didn't need to. That's the most powerful form of healing, indifference. She wasn't a villain in my story. She was just a consequence, a symptom of the disease I had finally cured myself of. Cole was the rot. Ava was a byproduct. I wouldn't waste another breath dissecting a past that no longer belonged to me. My story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. My rebirth. I started volunteering at a women's center. Somewhere I wish I had gone sooner. I listened to stories far worse than mine. I saw strength in every tear and victory in every small decision to walk away. And I started sharing my own truth, not for pity, but as proof. Proof that you can survive being used, being discarded, being misunderstood, and come back stronger. My voice, once silenced by doubt and manipulation, now stood firm. Cold. Maybe. But cold is just what warmth becomes when it learns it can't save everyone. I wasn't cruel. I was healed. There's a difference. I built new friendships, made new memories. And each day, I added another brick to the life he thought I'd never manage without him. The joke was on him. One day, I saw Cole at the grocery store. He looked older, tired, worn, smaller. He noticed me and froze, eyes wide. I nodded politely, not stopping. But he called out. "You look good," he said, almost in disbelief. "Thanks," I replied, smiling slightly. I could see the words he wanted to say, forming but unspoken. But I didn't need them. I didn't need closure. I already had it. I walked away without looking back. And it hit me, this was the final chapter. Not some explosive confrontation. Just peace. A quiet ending to a loud mistake. He once told me I was too cold. But maybe I had simply learned to stop burning for people who never brought warmth of their own. I was free. Finally completely free. People often ask if I regret marrying him. I don't. That chapter shaped me. It showed me my thresholds, my weaknesses, and eventually my strength. Without him, I might have never looked in the mirror and seen the woman I am now, resilient, grounded, sharp. He taught me what I would never accept again. And for that, I'm oddly grateful. Not to him, but to the version of myself that finally chose self-respect over illusion. Life moved on. I met people who valued my presence, not just my patience. And love. It came quietly when I was no longer searching. A man who didn't need to dim my light to feel seen. And for the first time, love felt like warmth, not sacrifice. What a beautiful, cold awakening. We met at a charity event. He was there on behalf of a local architecture firm, tall and calm, with eyes that didn't wander and words that didn't wound. His name was Marcus. He listened more than he spoke, and when he laughed, it sounded like the opposite of everything I'd been through, safe. We started with coffee, then long walks that turned into longer conversations. He never asked about my past, but when I shared it, he didn't flinch. "She's gone," I said about the woman who endured Cole. "Good," he said, gently taking my hand. "Because I like who you are now." I didn't fall fast. I grew steady. And as our lives slowly threaded together, I realized love doesn't need to hurt to be real. It just needs to feel like home. Marcus never competed with my independence. He celebrated it. When I worked late, he brought food without comment. When I succeeded, he clapped the loudest. And on days when the world felt heavy, he simply sat with me in silence until I could breathe again. That was love, not grand gestures or endless declarations, but presence. Real, grounding presence. I never thought I'd love again, not after what Cole had carved out of me. But Marcus didn't see me as broken. He saw me as rebuilding. Slowly, his steady care chipped away at the last walls I built. Not because he asked, but because he waited. Love, I learned, doesn't rush you. It just holds the space until you're ready to return to yourself. And with him, I was. One night, I opened a drawer and found Cole's old letters, ones I never mailed back, filled with apologies and half-hearted pleas. I sat on the floor and read them one last time. Not out of longing, but closure. They didn't sting anymore. They felt like fiction, someone else's story in someone else's life. I gathered them up, walked to the fireplace, and burned them. The flames danced, warm and final. Marcus came home as the last ashes settled. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Just cleaning out ghosts." He didn't press, just kissed my forehead, and poured us 2 glasses of wine. That night, wrapped in a quiet far removed from the chaos I once called love, I slept soundly, for the first time in years. Months passed, and my name was listed among the top 30 under 30 in design. I got the call while out shopping for groceries, and instead of screaming or crying, I smiled. Quiet victories meant the most. I went home, opened a bottle of wine, and toasted alone before Marcus arrived. Because some celebrations need to be had with yourself first. I remembered who I'd been when Cole told me I'd never make it without him, shaky, unsure, surviving. Now, I was thriving. My company was expanding. My team respected me. My ideas no longer needed validation. They stood tall on their own. I built everything from rock bottom, and I carried no shame in that. Because rock bottom had taught me how to rise, and I rose beautifully. Cole eventually sent one final message. A long one, almost poetic, as if words could rewrite history. He said he missed me, that Ava had been a mistake, that he was lost. He apologized again, begged for a meeting. But I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Not because I was cold, but because I was done. Some stories don't deserve sequels. Some bridges should stay burned. He didn't deserve access to the woman I'd become. She was earned through pain, growth, and unwavering resolve. And she didn't belong in his memory. She belonged in her future. I didn't tell Marcus about the message. Not because I was hiding anything, but because it didn't matter. Cole had finally become what I always hoped he'd be to me. Irrelevant. It wasn't until a mutual friend invited us both to a networking brunch that I saw Cole again. He arrived late, disheveled, clearly not expecting to see me. I was seated at the head table, co-hosting the panel. When he realized I was one of the speakers, his expression twisted into something between shame and disbelief. I didn't flinch. I addressed the room, shared my journey, my failures, my comeback. I watched him shrink in his seat as others leaned in, hanging onto my words. The applause at the end wasn't just polite, it was earned. When our eyes met briefly, he looked away first. That was new. Afterward, as guests mingled, he kept his distance. He no longer had a place near me, and for once he knew it. Marcus found me afterward, pressing a kiss to my temple like it was the most natural thing. I leaned into him, proud, not just of my speech, but of the life I'd built. A colleague approached and introduced herself, praising my story, my rise. Cole stood within earshot, silent and small. For so long, I used to shrink myself to fit into his world. Now, he couldn't even step into mine. That night, Marcus held me closer than usual, like he knew something had shifted again. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. I smiled. "So, am I?" And I meant it. The scars Cole left behind had turned into armor. And I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading, creating, inspiring. My pain had purpose now, and it was powerful. I kept building, not just my brand, but my peace. I moved into a loft that overlooked the skyline, all glass and silence and light. My studio walls were covered in vision boards and color swatches. I traveled. Paris, Tokyo, Milan. I gave talks, mentored young women who reminded me of who I'd once been, unsure, silenced, waiting for permission to dream. I didn't preach. I shared. And somewhere in that, healing rippled outward. I knew now that my story wasn't unique, but my survival was. And if I could spark that same fire in someone else, then everything I endured meant something. Marcus came with me on some trips, stayed behind on others. We didn't cling, we supported. We thrived separately and together. Love didn't mean losing myself. It meant becoming more of me. Sometimes I still passed familiar places. Our old apartment building, the bakery where we used to pretend we were happy, the bench where I cried after Ava's name first slipped from his lips. But the ache was gone. In its place was calm. The past didn't haunt me anymore. It humbled me. I even started writing, just a little. Essays about recovery, about starting over. A magazine picked one up, then another. Soon I had a column. Reborn, they called it. Fitting. Readers wrote in, thanking me for putting their pain into words. But really, I was just doing what I wish someone had done for me, telling the truth. Not the polished, pretty version. The raw one. The one where strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just keeps showing up, one day at a time. The biggest, full-circle moment came unexpectedly. I was invited to judge a national design competition, and one of the finalists was from Cole's company. Not him, one of his interns. A talented young woman with nervous hands and bright eyes. She presented beautifully, her work speaking for itself. I voted for her, because her brilliance had nothing to do with her boss. When she won, she cried. Cole tried to approach me after the event, maybe to gloat, maybe to reconnect through her. I stopped him with a single glance. She earned this. Don't ruin it by making it about you, I said quietly. He paused, embarrassed. I walked away before he could respond. I wasn't angry, just finished. He couldn't touch my world anymore. And that was the real victory. After that competition, I noticed something interesting. People began to treat me not just as a survivor, but as a leader. Invitations rolled in not because of pity, but because of power. Brands wanted me. Networks wanted interviews. I was no longer the woman wronged. I was the woman who rewrote the ending. Marcus surprised me one evening with a quiet dinner on the rooftop of our building. You know, he said, his eyes soft in the candlelight, you're not just incredible because of what you overcame. You're incredible because you never let it turn you cruel. I blinked back tears. Because he was right. I didn't become heartless. I became whole. And loving again, without fear, without shrinking, without compromise. That wasn't weakness. That was the bravest thing I'd ever done. One morning, I received a message request on social media from Ava. I hesitated, then opened it. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a tangle of guilt and half-excuses. She said she'd been young, easily flattered, manipulated. That she thought she'd won until she realized the prize wasn't what she imagined. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because it wasn't my job to help her heal. We all carry our own mess. Mine had made me better. Hers had made her bitter. That wasn't my responsibility to fix. I took a screenshot, archived it, and moved on. Some stories don't deserve sequels. And some people don't deserve a reply. I chose peace. I chose privacy. I chose to invest that energy into building something Ava and Cole could never touch, my future. A year passed, then another. I became a guest lecturer at a design university where students quoted my work and shared sketches they created after reading my story. One girl stopped me in the hallway after a talk, eyes glassy. Your writing saved me, she whispered. I hugged her tightly, remembering how it felt to need someone to say the hurt wouldn't last forever. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just rebuilt a career, I'd built a legacy. Marcus and I adopted a dog, laughed about baby names, traveled slower now. Our love wasn't fire, it was warmth. Steady, honest, kind. Some nights, I'd lie awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, whispering a thank you to the version of me who walked away that night. Because she saved my life. And gave me this one. It wasn't a fairy tale. Not every day was perfect. But that was the beauty of it. Real love didn't demand perfection. It made room for flaws, for growth, for quiet redemption. One day, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found a photo of Cole and me back when I still thought he was my forever. I held it for a second, then tore it in half. Not out of anger, but ceremony. That chapter was closed. Fully. Finally. I didn't need to carry it anymore. I wasn't his wife. I wasn't his victim. I wasn't even his memory. I was my own story now. And every page I turned was written in strength. The kind of strength that doesn't roar for attention, but hums with quiet, unshakable truth. I had found home. Inside myself. On our second anniversary. Marcus gave me a ring, not for engagement, not for tradition. Just a promise. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said. I slipped it on, smiling. "As long as we never forget who we are on our own." He nodded. Because that was our secret, independence in unity. We weren't two halves. We were two wholes who chose each other, daily, freely. That night, we danced under string lights in our backyard, barefoot and laughing, like kids. I thought about how far I'd come, from the woman, once broken in silence, to the one who now glowed in joy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was simply walking forward, with grace, with love, and with fire in my bones. I didn't need validation anymore, but life has a way of handing it to you once you stop begging for it. One day, while attending an industry panel, I was introduced as one of the most inspiring turnarounds of the decade. The moderator asked what had changed everything for me. I smiled thoughtfully and said, "I stopped giving chances to people who didn't value me the first time." The room went quiet, then erupted into applause. Not because it was clever, but because it was real. Afterward, a woman about my age approached with tears in her eyes. "You made me believe I can start over." And in her voice, I heard echoes of my own. That scared, silenced woman I used to be, and I knew then my story mattered. A few months later, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a women's summit. I stood behind the podium, looked out at hundreds of faces, and breathed deeply. Once upon a time, I was convinced that love meant sacrifice, that staying silent was strength, that shrinking myself made me easier to love. I was wrong. The crowd leaned in. The truth is, the right people won't fear your fire. They'll warm themselves by it. I saw heads nodding, tears falling. That moment sealed it for me. I wasn't just surviving, I was igniting others. I was no longer a cautionary tale. I was a lighthouse for anyone who'd ever been dimmed. My pain had purpose. My rebirth had reach. And I was finally exactly where I was meant to be. On the drive home from that event, Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're changing the world, you know." I laughed softly, one truth at a time. As we pulled into our driveway, I caught sight of a message request on my phone. "Cole. Again. But this one just said, 'I saw you speak. You're incredible.'" No ask. No plea. Just recognition. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the full message. Because what mattered wasn't that he saw me now. It was that I no longer needed to be seen by him. I turned my phone off, stepped inside, and curled up on the couch with Marcus and our dog. Peace isn't loud. It's soft, simple, and unshakable. And I'd finally built it from the ashes of what tried to break me. That winter, snow fell thick and slow outside our windows. I hosted a gathering at our home. Close friends, a few colleagues, some of the women I'd mentored. There was music, laughter, warmth. I stood by the fireplace, wine glass in hand, and felt it wash over me. This was the life I was always meant to have. Not lavish, not perfect, but deeply mine. One of my ments pulled me aside. "You don't just glow," she said. "You radiate freedom." And I realized she was right. I no longer measured love by how much I could endure. I measured it by how free I felt in its presence. And in Marcus's arms, in my own skin, in this chosen life, I had never felt freer. Healing didn't make me hard. It made me whole. And yet, I never erased the scars. They reminded me of nights I cried alone, of mornings I couldn't rise, of lies whispered to silence me. I didn't hate those memories. I honored them because they shaped the steel in my spine. Sometimes, I revisit the journals I kept during the darkest parts of my marriage. I don't do it to reopen wounds, but to honor the woman who endured it all. She didn't know she'd survive. She had no roadmap, no savior, but she clawed her way out anyway. That woman, shaking, unsure, barely breathing, she is my hero. Every success I've had belongs to her. Every boundary I now protect. Every dream I chase. Every truth I speak. It's all because of her courage. And I will never stop thanking her for surviving. Sometimes, I walk by places that once held pieces of my heartbreak, a restaurant corner, a familiar park bench, the boutique where I cried in the dressing room after seeing Cole with her. But they don't sting anymore. Now, they feel like folded pages in a finished chapter. I pause, acknowledge them, then keep walking. My story didn't end there. It began. These places remind me that I didn't just survive. I transformed. And maybe that's the point of pain, to refine you, not define you. When people ask if I ever miss him, I say this: I miss the version of me who loved him. Because she was loyal, hopeful, and full of light. But I don't miss who I became beside him. That woman disappeared. And the one who replaced her, unstoppable. A few years later, at a black tie gala for a charity I now chaired, I saw him again. Alone. Older. Faded. He approached slowly, cautiously, like he was stepping into sacred ground. "You look happy," he said quietly. I smiled. "I am." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I turned toward Marcus, tall, kind-eyed, waiting with my coat. "Take care of yourself, Cole," I said gently. And that was it. No drama. No lingering pain. Just a final goodbye wrapped in grace. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need closure. I had given that to myself long ago. Walking away from him that night didn't feel like loss. It felt like peace. Because the best revenge was never revenge. It was happiness. Real, grounded, earned happiness. And I had it. In that final chapter of my old life, I stopped asking why it happened. Stopped grieving the what-ifs. Instead, I honored the journey. I'd loved, lost, fallen apart, and rebuilt. That's the quiet miracle of starting over. You learn to hold your own hand first. You stop seeking rescue. You become it. And one morning, years after it all began, I stood in front of a mirror, no makeup, hair messy, wearing pajamas, and I smiled. Not because I looked perfect, but because I looked powerful, peaceful, whole. The woman staring back wasn't built in a day. She was carved by heartbreak and refined by fire. And now she belonged to no one but herself. That, more than anything, was the victory. Not who I left, not what I built, but who I finally became.